Hey, my new book is out, Set It on Fire, The Art of Innovation. Click on the link to learn more. And don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.
Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Real inspiration for real innovators. If you're looking for innovation and leadership transformation, your journey starts now.
Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Born. Hey, did you know that my new book is out, Set It on Fire, The Art of Innovation? Head over to setitonfire.co to learn more. Well, my guest today is Cameron Singh, and Cameron is pretty incredible. You're going to meet him today. He's an author of a book called Navigation and Discovery, which I can't wait to dive in and talk about. Not only that, he co-hosts 2 leadership podcasts, and he is a certified coach, a speaker, a trainer, and you're in for a special treat today. Welcome to the podcast, Cameron.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you for having me on.
Well, I want to dig right into your book. I had the opportunity to grab this book, and we'll talk about where everyone can get it at the end. But I want to talk a little bit, maybe zoom out a little bit and just say, hey, what inspired you to write this book, Navigation and Discovery? It's been pretty awesome to dig into.
Yeah, this book was actually something that the story was, I really wanted to share my journey and story of navigation and discovery because I had the opportunity. My background is more so in the aviation industry, and I had a lot of challenges early on trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life, where I wanted to go, and how faith was a part of that. And I got to experience a lot of leadership roles that at a very young age. And I really wanted to share that message of moving forward within the workforce, the industry, and how not only how I was professionally, but the things that I was experiencing on a personal level, the struggles, the challenges. And I wanted to share an authentic message. And also, I came from my background where I grew up. A lot of people continue to stay where they're at. They did not move forward in their lives. And I really wanted to provide some encouragement to those people that I knew in that back then.
That's great. Well, I mean, even think about the fact that in your book, you're asking questions like, what are you working towards? I mean, I know that sounds like a simple question, but if someone really sits back and thinks about that, oftentimes we kind of fall into what we do, or we do what we do because we need to, pay the bills. But I love the fact that you're kind of taking people on this journey and helping them to discover, more about themselves, how they're wired, what matters to them. So let's dig in and talk about that. Like, how can someone begin to navigate and discover what they're called to do ultimately?
I think it truly starts with your why. I think staying true to your why. I know that there's a book out there from Simon Sinek. He's Start with Your Why. I think once you start there and why you do what you do, that's where you start. And one thing that I learned is that when we talk about passion, calling, and purpose, for me, that really changed throughout my journey. This book really covers my high school years and college years and a little bit of me entering the workforce. And so I think it changes over time, and be open and flexible into what your passion and calling and purpose is. And I think initially I was so centered on this one thing, becoming an airline pilot, and that's all I wanted to do. And I wasn't necessarily flexible with that. And once I began to open up and be open to this concept that I introduced, navigation and discovery, that it changed over time.
So let's back up a second and maybe tell your listeners a little bit how did you get into that navigation industry, and then what made you decide to take that route in the first place?
So I grew up by San Francisco International Airport. So I saw the big jumbo jets landing, taking off all day over the house that I grew up. And my dream was always to become an airline pilot. And that was my dream, flying for United Airlines, flying those jumbo jets, just like how I saw. And so I was so intrigued by aviation. And I eventually started working, once it was time for me to go in the workforce, started working for a private jet terminal operator at the airport. And I really enjoyed the private jet side of the world and enjoyed the relationship building and customer service, and I loved it. I loved what the business was, and I loved the people. I loved the interaction, the relationship building, and I wanted to pursue a career in that area and still doing that to this day.
Well, I loved page 96 of the book because this has kind of been my philosophy just in terms of how do you begin to move forward with ideas and thoughts. And so I want to read this because, of course I saw the word innovation was drawn right towards it, but you said I strove to be innovative and figure out ways we could continually improve. I voiced my ideas to my colleagues and leaders to get their buy-in. Some ideas worked, some didn't. But through this, I was adding value to the company. I would love for you to just talk about this season of your life and what that was like, working on those ideas and with that team.
Yeah, this quote that you took for the book on innovation, it was truly important when I started in the workforce. Is I had these fresh ideas that I wanted to bring to my boss at the time. I was only a frontline employee, but I had like all these ideas on how we can make things better, our processes better. We were using a lot of paper at the time. And so I was very open with my ideas. And the only way that the people around me were open to these ideas is because I built excellent relationships with the people that I work with, my boss, my coworkers, our customers at the time. And I built a good rapport with everyone. So they were receptive to the things that I had to say. And I was heavily focused on how it would help them make their job easier. I was more focused on them than the actual change or process. And some ideas worked, some didn't. And we tried them out, and if it didn't work, we put it in the trash and moved on. And we found a better way to do it. That's one thing I cherished from my boss at the time, is that he was open to every idea. He didn't necessarily put down certain ideas. He cherished it, and he had created that culture that I felt comfortable in. And it also made me feel valued as a frontline employee at the time, because I wasn't a supervisor, I wasn't a manager, I was just a frontline employee at that time, and I felt like I was more than a number. And that's truly what wanted me to continue to pursue a career in this side of the aviation industry.
This to me is so important. I want to pause on this for a second because, in my career when I was growing up, I had the same feelings towards the leaders that led me, was that I could pitch ideas, I could put thoughts out there. It's almost surprising to see that people that have leaders like that as a foundation, you almost can't go back, right, to working under someone who doesn't value your ideas, who won't let you pitch your ideas, because there's something that unlocks in people and in a culture when you can be effective and when you can dream and when you can try things, even if not everything works. If you can try it and put your ideas out there, there's something culturally that's built inside of people when that ability exists to do that. And I think that we almost lose something when people don't have the ability to try those things and to fail, right? To fail cheap, fail fast, but to keep trying ideas and trying new things.
Yeah, and not being afraid to speak up, because I think that was initially I was I entered the workforce very timid without any work experience. So I was very afraid to speak and speak my mind on certain things. But once I became comfortable and understood the environment, and that environment was created to, let's give it a go, let's try it out. And that's something that I've strived to do as a leader, is to create that same culture where, if we can't do something, or if an idea is we really can't do it, or even we sometimes we can't even give it a go, you try to explain like why we can't give this one a go. And that usually helps people understand why, and truly that you're valuing their ideas.
That's so powerful. I would love to zoom out and just talk a little bit about your favorite chapter in the book. Like when you think about this body of work that you've put out there, like what would you say is one of your favorite chapters to dig into here?
I would say owning the room. That
Yeah.
that is something that I struggled with initially. Owning the room was a concept that I learned from a book called Own the Room, and I didn't realize I was doing it until reading the book. And owning the room, where it started with was, like I mentioned earlier, was developing relationships with the people that I worked with. And it wasn't just saying hello, hi, how are you? It was trying to understand who they are beyond work. And once I started to understand each person on my team on an individual level beyond work, that's where I started to build trust with them. And they started to trust me. And they started to, because many of them were okay with their positions where they were at in their roles, and they had families well established. And I voiced that wasn't me. I voiced that I wanted to move forward within the industry, move forward within this company, and they all rallied around me, and they all listened to what I had to say because they knew I was on a different trajectory. And so owning the room is meaning you're not always the first to speak, but you're the first to listen. You're listening to people, what they have to say, and you speak intentionally, meaning you're providing value to someone, you're providing value to the room. And I still do this today. Is I'm not the first to speak in a group conversation. In groups, I'll be the quietest person in the room, and I'll be the last to speak because I want to hear other people. And that's truly how I define in this chapter how you own the room, is listening first and then speak.
That's really powerful. I mean, to me, when I hear you talk about that, it feels a lot like servant leadership. It feels like the idea that I'm going to let all the voices be heard before I try to jump in with my opinion. But something really cool happens, I think, for people who speak last is usually whatever they have to say is usually the most brilliant. And it's because they've had the opportunity to filter through the good ideas or the just okay
Yeah.
ideas or the, people who like to just kind of shout out versus the people who really think through what they're going to say. And they get to filter through all of that. And so I find the last person to speak is usually the one that brings the most brilliance to the table, right? Because they've had the opportunity to kind of survey the lay of the land. And then they just come in with this brilliant thought. And to me, that is part of owning the room, is just being able to filter through all the ideas, filter through everything that's being said, and like pull out the gold or the gem that's in that room.
Yeah, and it's not all about yourself too, especially when you're talking about servant leadership. It's about, what can I do to serve others? What can I do to help this person? What can I do to help my coworker? So once you shift that mindset, that really helps you once you take it off yourself.
So talk a little bit about, how did you get from the aviation industry into what you're doing today? What did it look like to cross that chasm?
I think what sparked it was I was in a, a junior leadership role at the time, and I actually was rejected. I wanted to pursue a doctorate, but the school I wanted to go to wouldn't accept me. I applied to this aviation program 3 times and I got rejected. And I was kind of I was stuck. I'm like, what do I do now? What is it that I can do? And so I was taking this aviation, like, continuing education course to learn more about the industry I was in. And I met a professor from the University of Charleston, and she was like, "Hey, we have this program called executive leadership." And I looked into it. I'm like, I really don't know what I'm doing in my leadership role. I need to learn more about leadership. So I said, let's give it a go. It was a hybrid program. So I was like, let's give it a go. And I was so intrigued by this topic called leadership. I heard this at a church conference years ago, and I was following a lot of these leadership gurus in this leadership space. And I'm like, I need to learn more about it. So once I started going through this program, and it was very application based, I started to learn more about myself and how I was as a leader. And it pushed me to become better as a leader. And now that's really what I want to do for others, is help develop other young people and students and young professionals that, no, you don't need to limit yourself based on where you came from or your circumstances. You can strive for higher and break those barriers that were traditionally set for you. Break those barriers, take it the next level, and keep going and going and going. There's more for your life than just based on the circumstances around you.
I love that. So talk to me about someone who is in the season of self-discovery. How is your book going to galvanize them? How is it going to help, kind of answer some questions, or maybe give them some questions that they need to be asking themselves right now. I think a lot of people are just in that season, especially as I talk to people at conferences. They're in this season of just self-discovery and rediscovery of like, what does the next season of my life need to look like? So what would you say your book does in terms of kind of speaking into some of that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of books out there that talk about purpose, passion, and calling. There's the 3 steps to being a successful person or whatever, or finding your purpose. And I think where it starts is eliminating all the voices around you, meaning, there'll be people around you that tell you, you need to do this, you need to pursue this, you need to go in this direction, you shouldn't go in that direction. And I think it's honing in on your uniqueness and where you see your greatest fulfillment. And I know sometimes that can be hard because sometimes those voices of people telling you to go in certain directions can be fairly loud. And then you're also comparing yourself with your peers on social media. Oh, this person is so successful, I should be like this person. Is hone in on where you find that fulfillment, hone in on what you enjoy. And so some questions that you may want to ask yourself is, what makes you happy? Where do you find that fulfillment? What what is it that you're doing now that doesn't fulfill you and that you
Mhm.
need to stop doing to turn yourself into the direction that you might need to go? And one thing I learned too is that passion, purpose, and calling, it truly changes over time, because if you're centered on this one thing that you need to go towards, it may not work out and you might end up not being fulfilled. Is be open and flexible, because you never know the direction that life may take you in this journey we're calling navigation and discovery.
Man, be open and flexible. I think there's something really important in that. I even just think about the fact that, where we start and where we see ourselves in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, it changes. And, there are things that you're going to naturally do in your life that bring you absolute joy and energy, and they're just, you feel like you were made or created to do that. And then there's going to be other things in our life that it's just a no for us. And I think we need to keep track of those things. Oftentimes I see people keep going back to the thing that they don't love because they don't know anything else. And sometimes we can be
Hmm.
trained in something that we're just not good at. And so, yes, we can do it, but it doesn't bring us joy or excitement or energy. And so those things are so important to look at. And I love that about this book. How can people work with you? What does it look like to work with you if someone is listening and they're saying, "Hey, not only do I want to dig into this book, but I'd like to work with Cameron on, navigating and discovering, what my life needs to look like." How would they work with you on that?
Yeah, so you can go to my website, CameronSingh.com, and connect with me on there. So this is actually book 1 of 4. So I'm working on my second book right now, which kind of continues the story of navigation and discovery, talking about my experience in new leadership roles. So, wherever you're at in your journey, happy to help in any way in terms of mentorship, providing guidance, asking questions, or challenging you on certain things. Happy to have a chat anytime. So you can connect with me, CameronSingh.com, and all my contact info is on there.
That's awesome. I really feel like this is going to be something that people can grab a hold of. They can follow your story. And I love that you said that this is 1 of 4. So you're going to continue this as a series. So there's going to be so much more coming behind what you're creating. I have a question, just a question of curiosity. Why 4? What's in the 4?
Well, initially I came up with this huge idea with the publisher saying, I want to write this book. And they're like, well, if you're going to write this book, it'll be a Harry Potter book. And so really these 4 books are different stages kind of throughout my 20s. So the first stage is new leadership role. Then the second stage is, so I build up to the first stage in navigation discovery. Then second stage is middle manager, middle leadership roles. Then I talk about senior leadership roles, and also then moving on to executive leadership roles, and a little bit of kind of my journey experiencing those different roles on a personal level as well.
Gosh, that's really cool. I feel like you're giving basically a toolbox to everyone for them to kind of
Yeah.
be able to chart out their own path and their own pathway of success and what that may look like for them.
Yeah.
That's really cool. What final thoughts would you have for us today? What would your action step, or what would you have us do as a result of this awesome conversation we've had today?
One final thought that I like to provide you on, this is something that I'm really passionate about, is don't let your circumstances define the trajectory of your life. One thing I like always doing is finding how I can go against the grain on certain things. A lot of the times that opportunities are provided is when I went against the grain, when I asked those tough questions and or provided those solutions to those tough questions.
That's awesome. Well, I love that, and I've loved our time today, Cameron. It's been really cool getting to know you, and thanks for jumping on today and sharing your journey with us.
Well, thank you so much, Natalie, for having me on the podcast.
Well, to our listeners, thank you for joining the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Remember, don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.
Thank you for joining us for the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our show on iTunes. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Innovation Meets Leadership, and visit our site at innovationmeetsleadership.com for more innovation resources.
Hey, my new book is out, Set It on Fire, The Art of Innovation. Click on the link to learn more. And don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.